Choice feels light when it is fully available. When nothing is threatened, the mind remains calm, detached, and quietly confident. Options appear ordinary. Decisions seem reversible. At this stage, freedom exists so naturally that it goes unnoticed, like air in a quiet room. Most people believe this is how desire works. They assume that preference forms through clarity, reflection, and rational evaluation. They think they want something because it fits their goals, their identity, or their values. But this belief rests on a fragile assumption that the mind evaluates value best when it is relaxed. In reality, the mind rarely assigns strong value in moments of abundance. When choices are open, emotion stays muted. The object remains neutral. There is no urgency to attach meaning. And because there is no pressure, the brain does not mark the moment as significant. This is why early decisions often feel unremarkable. A relationship at the beginning feels casual. A career path before commitment feels flexible. A product before scarcity feels replaceable. We interpret this emotional neutrality as indifference, when in fact it is simply the absence of threat. Psychologically, the brain is designed to conserve energy. It does not amplify emotion unless necessary. When freedom is intact, there is no signal that demands heightened attention. The system remains quiet, efficient, and restrained. This calm state creates a dangerous misunderstanding. People assume that if something does not feel intense, it must not matter. They equate emotional volume with importance. And because early choice lacks emotional weight, it is often undervalued. But value does not announce itself in advance. It emerges through contrast. And contrast requires change. The shift does not occur because the object improves. It occurs because the psychological environment changes. The moment abundance begins to shrink, the mind prepares to respond. What feels like indifference is not a lack of desire. It is simply desire waiting for context. The psychological shift begins the moment one option starts to fade. It does not need to vanish completely. Even the suggestion that an option may soon be unavailable is enough to change how the mind responds. At first, the change is subtle. Attention sharpens slightly. The object that once felt ordinary begins to stand out. The mind returns to it repeatedly, not because it suddenly became better, but because uncertainty entered the situation. As soon as availability is threatened, the brain interprets this as a loss of freedom, and loss, psychologically, carries far more weight than gain. Neuroscience shows that the emotional response to losing something is faster and stronger than the response to acquiring something new. The system evolved this way for survival, not for happiness. When choice feels constrained, emotion takes priority over evaluation. The rational system, which weighs costs and benefits, requires time. The emotional system reacts instantly. It asks only one question: what must be done to restore control? This is the moment when desire intensifies. But it is important to understand what kind of desire this is. It is not a calm preference. It is not rooted in long-term alignment. It is urgency-driven attachment. The mind begins to exaggerate the value of what is disappearing. Benefits feel more vivid. Drawbacks fade into the background. The object becomes mentally upgraded, even though nothing concrete has changed. This explains why people often say they realize the importance of something only after they almost lost it. The realization is real, but the cause is misunderstood. What intensified was not value, but emotional arousal. At this stage, the decision feels personal. The option feels tied to identity, pride, or self-image. Acting becomes emotionally loaded. Not acting feels dangerous. Choice, once light, now feels heavy. What forms under pressure is not true wanting. It is defensive attachment. Defensive attachment emerges when the mind senses that autonomy is being reduced. The object becomes important not for what it offers, but for what it protects. The feeling of agency. In these moments, people often confuse intensity with authenticity. The stronger the emotion, the more convinced they become that the desire is genuine. But intensity alone does not reveal truth. It reveals activation. Psychologically, defensive attachment serves one purpose: to eliminate discomfort as quickly as possible. By choosing the threatened option, the mind restores a sense of control. Relief follows, and that relief is often mistaken for satisfaction. This is why decisions made under pressure often feel correct at first and hollow later. The emotional payoff comes from ending uncertainty, not from the choice itself. Once the pressure disappears, the object loses its emotional charge. This pattern appears in many areas of life. People pursue relationships that only felt meaningful during instability. They accept jobs that felt necessary only because alternatives were removed. They make purchases they later struggle to justify. The common thread is not poor judgment. It is timing. When freedom is intact, preference is quiet. When freedom is threatened, attachment becomes loud. The mind reacts to the threat, not to the object. Understanding this distinction is crucial. Genuine desire remains relatively stable across time and context. Defensive attachment appears suddenly, spikes quickly, and fades once control is restored. When desire feels urgent, it is rarely about what is being chosen. It is about what is being lost. Scarcity is one of the most effective psychological tools because it bypasses reflection. It works not by improving quality, but by narrowing options. When something is framed as limited, the mind stops asking whether it is suitable. It starts asking whether it will be missed. And fear of missing out is far more motivating than curiosity or interest. This is why scarcity dominates modern environments. Limited time offers, exclusive access, final opportunities, disappearing availability. These signals push the emotional system into action before the rational system can intervene. Over time, repeated exposure to scarcity reshapes decision-making habits. People begin to associate urgency with importance. They trust pressure more than clarity. They learn to act quickly, not thoughtfully. This habit extends beyond products. It shapes relationships, lifestyles, and identities. People stay in situations longer than they should because leaving feels like losing an option. They rush into commitments because waiting feels dangerous. Scarcity also alters memory. Once an option disappears, the mind rewrites the past. Missed opportunities become idealized. What was ordinary becomes meaningful. Regret magnifies imagined value. This process creates a loop. The more people chase what disappears, the more powerful scarcity becomes. The mind learns that emotional intensity follows restriction and begins to seek it unconsciously. But intensity is not guidance. It is stimulation. A life guided by scarcity becomes reactive. Decisions are driven by avoidance of loss rather than pursuit of meaning. And over time, this erodes satisfaction, even when outcomes appear successful. The ability to make clear decisions depends on one condition: emotional neutrality. Clarity does not appear when options are collapsing. It appears when freedom is present and nothing is forcing action. This is why the most reliable preferences emerge in moments of calm, not urgency, when desire intensifies suddenly. The most useful question is not whether the option is attractive, but why it became urgent. What changed in the environment? What option feels threatened? What sense of control is at risk? True preference does not panic. It does not require pressure to exist. It remains recognizable even when alternatives are available. Learning to pause creates distance between feeling and action. That distance allows the rational system to re-enter. It allows value to be assessed without distortion. Not every strong desire deserves obedience. Some desires are signals of fear, not alignment. Recognizing the difference is a skill that develops over time, through awareness rather than resistance. When decisions are made from clarity, they tend to age well. They feel coherent even after emotion fades. When decisions are made from pressure, they require constant justification. The goal is not to eliminate emotion, but to understand its origin. Desire that emerges from freedom leads to stability. Desire that emerges from threat leads to reaction. A life shaped by clarity moves slowly, but with direction. A life shaped by pressure moves quickly, but often in circles. And the moment you can tell the difference, choice becomes light again.